And so I showed up, and it really is just boxes of little busted up bones. And so I sat down in the collections for a few days with specimens, like laying them out on a table and trying to reconstruct the skeleton back out. And it was while I was working on that, I was trying to identify whether we had any bones that were from the skull. And so one of the things you look for is, well, do we have any bones that have teeth in them? And these are very small bones. A lot of them we're looking at under a microscope. And I picked up one bone and I'm like, well, that looks like a piece of enamel on it, but it's not a bone that should be from the skull. And so I put it under the microscope, and that's when I discovered the piece of femur that had the tooth stuck in it. And so we got lucky in that it's really fragmentary material, but it's in good condition. The individual bones are in good condition, and we got kind of what you would need to have in order to kind of get spurred in that direction. So the big thing that we found was the end of a femur, so a thigh bone, which actually has a crocodile tooth stuck in it and broken off. And so that was our first big breakthrough of, hey, maybe this is why all this material is busted up. And then as we started looking on the other bones, we started finding marks that are known to be diagnostic for crocodilian feeding traces. And so all that evidence coming together suddenly started to make sense for why we were finding not good complete specimens of these little ornithischian dinosaurs. We were finding busted up material. And then we started looking at what was preserved, and the bones that we were finding are the typical bones that tend to fall off and be lost when crocodilians are feeding. So hands and feet, but without the rest of the limbs, or just the very ends of long bones with the middle part that has most of the meat on it busted off and gone. And then most of the bite marks are concentrated right around the joints, which is where the crocodilian would tend to bite onto, and then when they do their pulling or their death roll that they do, the ends of the bones tend to snap off more often than not in those actions. And so that's why we were finding these fragmentary bones. And I think it's kind of, it's kind of exciting. It's not a lot of times that you get information from the fossil record that's kind of action related, and an actual event that happens. And so it's not just, here's a new species of dinosaur, it looked like this. It's here's a new species of dinosaur, and we found it because the material was being concentrated by crocodilians that were feeding on it. And we've got, supportable evidence for that, so. They're kind of a plain looking dinosaur. The most that they would have had, and this was very selected for this group of animals, is this is actually a bone from the side of the skull called the jugal, and they've got a little horn that comes off the side, and so this would have been covered by a keratin sheath, and it would have been a little longer than in real life. So that is at the most any protection they would have had is a horn coming off of each side of their skull, but that's not really going to provide much protection against a crocodilian. That's more of something that they would have used for maybe competing amongst themselves, or for maybe fending off smaller predators. But in an ambush style attack of a crocodilian, it's not really going to come in very handy. Those kind of, the traditional ideas whenever you see in the popular literature, little baby dinosaurs either coming out of a nesting ground or, out somewhere on their own, they're normally having to worry about the theropod dinosaurs, the things like velociraptors, or, on bigger scales like T-Rex and things like that. That's what always gets depicted as a thing they have to worry about. But this kind of adds a new dimension of, well, they also had to be concerned about, going and getting water. They were being preyed on just like everything else was. And so it's not just this classic theropod dinosaurs versus ornithischian dinosaurs dynamic going on. You also had, your dominant riverine carnivores, your crocodilians, attacking these herbivores as well. So they kind of had it coming from all sides. So this is kind of showing that our experiments on living crocodiles is applicable back into the fossil record. And I think what this will do is it'll make it to where these discoveries will become more common once we demonstrate its usefulness and people start looking for these diagnostic marks. Because before, like I said, you'd see a mark on a bone and you'd say, well, this is some type of feeding trace. but wouldn't necessarily know what animal caused it in a lot of circumstances. And by showing that we have diagnostic traces that modern crocodilians leave on bones, and that you can follow those marks back into the fossil record, and that they stay diagnostic marks, we can start making these identifications. So I think this is going to be one of the first good studies that shows the applicability of applying that to the fossil record.